This is Learn from Others, where we interview a cross-section of successful individuals so you can learn from their experiences, achievements, and even their mistakes. We ask 4 questions that will educate and inspire. Greg Stanley will be your guide as we join our guest on a journey from adolescent daydreaming to success in today's world. Join us on this adventure as we learn from others together.
Well, welcome to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. I'm very excited to introduce our special guest, Dean Morash. Dean, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Greg.
Yeah, thanks for being on this show. Well, before we find out what you're actually doing today, if you would, could you tell us, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think what I wanted to be was determined when I was in high school.
Oh,
I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. Well, that was a result of just some classes I had in high school. I had a design class, where you drafted on a board, which they don't do anymore. And drafting really intrigued me. My father was very much into airplanes. And I thought, let's collide those two. And so I want to be an aeronautical engineer. And that's what I pursued. And I did my undergraduate education.
Wow. That's pretty aspirational. So what was like one of those first classes that things started to click for you?
It's like any education. You go through your general ed and you're wondering if you did the right thing. But once you start getting into the discipline within the degree. So I think the first class that really made it clear that I'd made the right decisions was aerodynamics. That was a fascinating class focused on the study of how do planes fly and what's the engineering behind it.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine that's very interesting. Now, am I correct that if it looks like a teardrop, it's probably pretty aerodynamic?
Yeah. Well, I think cars are probably as aerodynamic as planes are now, at least the performance ones. And so all you got to do is look at a modern Corvette or a Ferrari or any of those exotic cars, and you fully begin to understand how technology's evolved, and wind tunnels have become as important for the auto manufacturers as it is for airplane development and manufacturing.
Yeah, that's really, really amazing. Well, if you could tell us, what was your first real job? Like maybe it was when you were in junior high or high school, one where you had a paycheck and felt like you had some responsibilities.
Well, I remember my dad told me, he said, look, you've got a car, which I put an engine in, and he said, that's great, but now you need insurance. And if you expect me to pay for that, then you need to go out and get a job. I'm in a panic. So the first thing I had to do is figure out what. So my first real job was working as a prep cook in a local Italian restaurant. And not that I was qualified, and that didn't seem to matter. I just needed money. So I went in there and interviewed with this Italian lady, and she was pure Italian. And she said, what do you know about cooking? I said, well, I make breakfast, and I can make cookies. So that's what qualified me for that very first paycheck.
That's awesome. And the fact you needed insurance for your car, that was the driver, right?
That's right. I had to get my old man to front my insurance bill. So that was a 64 Ford Galaxie 500 XL convertible.
Wow.
And I could pay for gas and a few other things, but, like most kids, I couldn't afford everything. So that was the deal I made with my dad.
Cool. Well, why don't you tell us, what do you do for a living now? You wanted to be an aeronautical space engineer, and what do you do today?
Well, it's a far cry from that, I will tell you that. But I own and operate a car storage business, and within that business, we store vehicles for our customers, and they run the gamut from exotics to classics to resto mods. Our primary objective is just to provide for the care and feeding of our customers' car collections. We're really the extra garage, the man cave that they can't afford or they're not able to put together.
You alluded to that. How did you get there? Because if I remember correctly, you actually went the aeronautical route.
I did. So I went to school at San Jose State, got my aeronautical degree, and went right to work at Northrop during the go-go days in the early 80s. Went to work on some pretty exciting programs like the B-2 bomber, F-18, and a few others, and got involved in manufacturing engineering. And that was, it was very rewarding and fulfilling, and that's exactly what I wanted to do. But like so many other things, you're not sure if what you want to do is what you're good at, or if that's going to be fulfilling. So it took me a long time to figure out if that's where I wanted to be. So I spent 16 years of my one chapter in my life in that industry, but I moved around. So it gets a little convoluted because, granted, I went into that engineering role thinking that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. But the company was so big, you could bounce around. So I went from, for example, manufacturing engineering to manufacturing to quality to program management. So sometimes within large companies, young people get an opportunity to move around and gain considerable breadth of experience that you wouldn't be able to gather in a smaller firm,
Right.
for example. But, it took me, a good part of 15 years and another degree. I got a master's degree, and I realized I wanted to be more involved in marketing and more involved in acquiring customers. When you work for a large company like that, you're so far removed from sales and marketing, especially in a company like aerospace. I think the other thing that dawned on me too early on was, gosh, I'm a very social person. My son tells me that I never shut up, and I think he's right. So I bring that up for an important reason, Greg, and I think your social style at work is such an important component of understanding when you say, what do I want to do? What do I want to be? If those are in conflict with one another, let's say you want to be an engineer, but you're a very social person, that's probably not a good environment for you to wind up being successful. The engineering role is very isolated.
Right.
So there's other things for young people to really consider when they think about this notion of, what do I aspire to be? Take stock of other things like social style, environment. Do I want to be in a large company or a small? Do I want to be in a collaborative environment, or do I want to be, more in a structured environment?
Yeah, that's a really great point, because if you think about someone who's very social and they find themselves crunching numbers behind a computer 24/7, they're not going to get as much fulfillment. They're probably wanting to interact with customers or, bring on some new clients, just that interaction piece. I could see that being something that they would really desire.
I think the other thing that's important to share is that it takes time to figure this stuff out, and it's okay.
Right.
And it's okay to take that time.
How did you figure it out? And
Well, I knew that I wanted to expand my repertoire, from a work environment standpoint, right? But I didn't know exactly what. But I thought, nothing's better than gaining some additional education. So I went back and got a master's degree at Pepperdine University in Southern California.
what were the steps you took that
awesome.
ended up to where you are now?
I just thought, let's open up my mind to what's going on in the rest of the world, because again, working in a company is pretty isolated. You don't see the rest of the business world necessarily, or what else there is out there. So the best thing about school, one of the best things anyway, is finding out what else is going on out there. So when you're in a master's program, you're doing a lot of case studies, for example, Harvard
Beautiful campus
case studies, where you're looking at lessons learned from other companies. Great stuff. So you could be looking at different industries, different organizations, different roles in that pursuit of education. Once I completed my master's, it was clear that I wanted to be more on the business side, and marketing seemed to be a really good direction for me to go. I was probably 12, maybe 13 years into my aerospace career. And when I graduated, it was clear that I wanted to join this, this raging industry called high tech, which was really hitting on all cylinders in the late 90s. And so I had an opportunity when I graduated the program.
Right. Okay. Now, how far into
of,
your career were you at this point where you got your second
high-tech
master's degree and we're looking at more of a marketing kind of role?
Quantum-built backup database management tools like disk-based and tape-based libraries. Not terribly sexy industry, but a very, right? But backup was hot in the day, right? And so was tech. And I just thought, and I jumped in with both feet. I had no experience in marketing. I had no experience in tech. But, for all the people that told me, hey, don't do that. Nobody's going to open that door. Nobody's going to let you in. Complete lie. But a lot of people believe that. So, again, I encourage anybody that's pursuing something to be persistent
Right.
and don't allow
But a growing industry.
conventional wisdom to interrupt dreams or pursuits of something that they're passionate about. I had no business getting into that industry or getting that job, but that didn't prevent me from getting it. So I was in tech essentially good 13, 14 years, and similar to my experience in aerospace and engineering, I did a variety of marketing roles and really enjoyed it. I mean, I really felt like I had kind of landed in a space that was invigorating. A lot of young people, a lot of people with education.
Right.
Data was
Yep.
important.
So how long were you in the
Science of data
tech
management
sector?
was really, really important, and computers. All this technology, whether it was software based on specific applications like marketing, database software, or whatever it was so intriguing and fascinating. So it was great to be involved. But again, like everything else, I think I had reached a level of satisfaction, navigated, all those waters of large corporate, medium to small, the large corporations. And at some point, it became clear that it was time for me to find something that I was more passionate about. Being good at it, or being pretty good at something like I was director of marketing, was good, and the money was good, so it enabled me to do the things I wanted to do in life. But at some point you realize, hey, something's missing, right? And again, I go back to my education, and I think the education was awesome because at Pepperdine we were really focused on entrepreneurship and the importance of thinking like a business person, being an entrepreneur, even if you're in a large company. But I was always intrigued by that idea of, like, can a company man like myself become an entrepreneur? And I think, again, conventional wisdom says, you're either going to be, and I think this is something that a lot of young people should think about. A lot of conventional wisdom suggests that either you're one or the other. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's because your family are entrepreneurs. So it's that same kind of bias, I would say, that, people have to be careful not to be overly influenced by that. So for me, I just thought, let's reinvent ourselves and go for this late chapter in my career life and go try to become an entrepreneur. And basically what I did at that point is I took the benefits financially of all those years in high tech, and I was able to use that as my capital. So again, it goes against conventional wisdom. People say, well, start when you're young. Absolutely. That makes sense. But you're actually in a better situation when you're older because now you've got operating capital. Now you've got experience that you can bring. And so arguably you might have a better chance for success as an entrepreneur when you're older.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great point. I think when you're going to start something that you're passionate about, let's say it's a business or you're going to be an entrepreneur, I think it's important to have some strong networking into that industry. For example, I was going
well, and you also
car
sound
shows,
like
and my
you're
buddies
quite the
ran and
networker
managed
just
car shows.
organically,
We were hanging around
and I know you're a car
every
guy,
weekend
so you
anyway.
probably had
And
a
we
lot
knew
of
the
connections
car community pretty
before you
well.
even started up the
But
business,
just being
I
a
would imagine.
natural networker, bringing those, social skills, if you will, to the party, so important. I think that's a great point. So what I didn't know, again, it's important for young people to understand that people like you and me, we don't know what we don't know. And so we go through the same process young people do. And we say, God, do you think you got the skills? I went through the same process. I said, I know marketing pretty well, but I've never carried a sales bag, or I've never been a salesperson, never been a
and you're
general
a
manager,
marketer for the last 15 years, so
So
that has
there's
got to be a huge benefit
those
for you.
things that are on your mind, right? Wondering if you have enough of what it takes to be successful. And so, again, just because you're worried about that doesn't mean that you can't overcome it. I think the marketing was my superpower and maybe my, like you said, networking or comms ability. But I think when you have some, really strengths, I think you can overcome your weaknesses or areas that you really need to improve on because you bring a unique skill set to, let's say, a business.
Right.
Love that question. Every day is different. My son he's here now 5 days a week, helping me manage the business. And when it first started out, it was me, myself, and myself, and it was pretty quiet. But now we've got 2 buildings and, 85, 90 cars under management. And so our typical day is not typical at all.
Now, if you would,
Every
tell
day
us, what is your typical week like with your business there?
Fairly common during the course of a day. Cars that are coming in, either customers that are dropping them off, they've had them, enjoyed them for the weekend, and they're bringing them back. Or like a car show. A bunch of people, for example, this weekend went to a car show up in Lake Arrowhead, Big Bear, and so they brought them back. So we're slowly starting them to come back. Marconi, there was a car show there, so customers there. So people are bringing their cars back that have enjoyed them for a week or a few days. But what's great is every day it's a steady stream of cars either we haven't seen or cars we absolutely just enjoy seeing on a daily basis. Then we get to share those cars with other customers and new customers. And so really it's an ongoing car show every day. Yeah, and so people come in, they're buying a car because we also consign vehicles, and they're like, "Oh my God, look at that Ferrari! Oh my gosh, look at that Porsche!" So they get distracted too, even though they're here for a very specific purpose. So sometimes we're kind of playing the docent at the museum tour, like walking around and showing them cars. But the dirty side of this business is,
It's my
there are
kind of
days
place.
when we're selling cars. There's days when we're trying to figure out why a car won't start, trying to get it started. We're pumping up tires and moving cars by hand because they won't start. And so it's not always romantic, but it's like anything else. It's pretty cool though. Our business is both physical. Our business is both fun because we're around a bunch of cool cars and we get to drive them in and out of the building. And we're around car people, but in general, those people are pretty nice. Even though many of them, are pretty well off, you'd be surprised at how kind our clientele is in general. Right.
Right. Yeah.
I'd have to say that I don't think from a career standpoint I would do much.
Yeah, cars
different.
seem to bring everybody together.
And I say that because I think
that's really
the
cool.
journey.
Well, cool.
Is
As a reminder, you
really
can check
what
out all previous
defines
episodes
who
at
we become and who we are.
learnfromothers.org. And if you're an
I encourage
educator or
everybody
a student,
to
you can search for podcasts by career cluster.
I
So,
think
Dean,
all
we
of
learned
these
what you wanted to be when you grew up
experiences
and
in
what you
life
actually do
and in
today.
career
So,
are
looking
very
back,
important. Whether it's
and if you could
success
do it
with
all over
failure or
again, what
somewhere
would you do
between,
differently?
These building blocks give us a unique perspective and give us a unique set of toolkit, if you will, that makes us uniquely us. And certainly I would have benefited by knowing that going into an engineering discipline is very isolating. And would that have changed my mind? I don't know. It's a great question, but I think that enjoy what you're doing is the most important part, even if it's not where you're ultimately heading. Apply yourself, do the best you can. Don't be focused on that next thing. And that's, I think, where a lot of people get lost. It's like, okay, this isn't what I wanted for myself. This isn't what I imagined it to be. If you can do a little bit of Jedi mind trick and say, I'm going to make the best of this. I'm going to get the most I can out of this. That's the most important perspective, because then you can capitalize on that experience. So I guess the answer to the question is I wouldn't change a lot. I think in my personal life I would change things, but in my career life, I don't think so.
Right. Yeah.
So I think what's daunting for a lot of young people these days is just the pressure that's on them, whether that's parental, societal, or
that's great knowing that, looking back, that you really want to change anything. Well, cool. Well, let's talk to the student who wants to do what you do. Now, you can say, it's owning your own business. You could be an entrepreneur. It could be, specific to what you actually do. What advice would you give them?
Don't look at it as, God, I can't make a mistake. A lot of people get frozen like, God, what do I want to be when I grow up? Wait a minute. I don't know. And it seems like everybody else around me does, And then the panic sets in. I'm like, well, there's something wrong with me. I don't know. Absolutely the wrong perspective. I think there are some savants. There's a unicorn in everything if we want to look hard enough. But we got to stop as kids and adults, quit looking at the unicorn, placing any expectation on ourselves. Go out there and try. Go out there and explore. But don't be afraid to change. I think so many people are got to pick the right degree. I've got to declare a major. I've got to get to the best school. Well, no, you don't. What about being a journeyman? What about working with your hands? We were just talking the other day with a neighboring business about how much the dock worker makes down here, picking up the containers and putting them on ships in Long Beach. They're making $150,000, $200,000 a year. But again, we're so obsessed with this notion of figuring out what we want to be when we grow up that we might lose sight of the opportunities that are presented to us. So look at it as more of an exploration and not a very specific understanding of what I want to be. I think some people have the benefit of right out of the gate figuring that out, but that's the minority.
Wow.
That's shocking. Wow. It is crazy. That's correct.
Right. I
When
totally
I
agree with
got it,
that. And I've
it
done
worked, but,
coming up on 100
my
interviews,
friend
and only
teased
2 of
me
them
that
were
every
direct
panel
lines
was a
to
different
what they
color.
do today. All the others were
'Cause
only
it was
2.
pretty beat up when I got it, so I went
Yeah,
to a
isn't that
junkyard.
crazy? Yeah.
Bought
Well,
the
speaking of
old
journeys,
cars, so
success
it might have
largely
had 5
depends
or
on
6
reliable
different colors.
transportation. And
But
I'm
by
a
the
car
time
guy,
it
you're a
was
car guy,
done,
and
it
you've
was
already told
blue.
us what your
I
first
had it
car was,
painted,
which
so
was what, a
and so it was a
1964
beautiful
Ford Galaxie
blue
XL
metallic,
convertible?
and it was a convertible.
What color?
So when I was done, it was a pretty awesome car. Right now, we've got a 1957 Bonneville convertible that's just exceptional. It's a Pontiac made these cars for every dealer, and so there's only 620 of them made.
Okay.
Just a beautiful car that's something different that you probably won't see, and it just pushes all the buttons
Awesome.
for me. So I'm still a
Yeah,
guy that
no, that's
got a
great. Well,
car
what's
that
your
is
dream
classic.
car?
That's a perfect example of a car that I love. You know, I also am very intrigued by these modern exotic cars too. We've got a McLaren 720S in here. It's metallic yellow, and it's absolutely gorgeous. But super fast car. You get inside that car, and it feels like you're in some kind of a gaming environment. It doesn't feel like you're in an automobile. One part of my business that's really cool is we get to experience these cars, and we don't have to buy them.
Right, that's nice. Well, one great perk to some jobs is a company car. So if I had all the money in the world, I'd love to buy you a cool company car based on your job. And so I went to your website and I saw that you wanted to create an experience and destination for customers who periodically need to decompress in a purpose-built car environment. So I thought, what car would help you, like, it would be so involved and all-encompassing, it would kind of take you away, where you could decompress. So I was kind of trying to go along those same lines. And I thought, you're in Southern California. So the car I came up with you is an old car, but it wasn't built until 1989. So I picked for you a 1932 SoCal Roadster that was built in 1998 as one of the SoCal commemorative cars. So it's a 32 Deuce Ford, but it has the red and white scheme I know you're familiar with. So that's the car I'd buy for you.
Put on top of that and get going on that project. But I belong to a car club down in Dana Point, and man, all those guys have some beautiful roadsters that they've dropped every penny of their life savings into. And that's the SoCal lifestyle right there. You nailed it.
Oh.
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. Right. We're always looking for those. Well, they can go onto our website at SoCalCarStorage.com, and there's all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, and what's so great about this particular car is you could use it as your company car. You don't have to rename it or anything. It already says SoCal on it. So
kind of the origin of the company, but encourage them
write
to
it
go
off,
there,
business
kick the
expense.
tires on that, and or give us a call.
Well, thank
if
you
they
so
want
much
to
for
talk
taking us on
more,
your
maybe
career
we
journey
don't.
today.
Always
What's the
make
best
myself
way our
available
listeners
for
can learn more about
anyone
you
that's
and your
that's
company?
looking for a little bit of help. You're welcome. My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Learn from Others, where we help others succeed by sharing success. Where will our next adventure take us? Subscribe to find out. If you know of someone who has a cool career story or occupation, contact Greg through Instagram at Greg Stanley LFO. That's GregStanley
Let him reach out to you that way.
LFO.
Well, thank you so much for taking us on
as
your
we
career
learn
journey
from others
today.
together.